A new truck costs $70,000, but its engine won't outlive the loan you took to buy it. A $4,000 truck from 1999 will still be running when the new one is sitting in a scrapyard. You paid $70,000 for the worse engine. This is how that happened. Now let's be honest about what that $70,000 truck does well, because it does a lot. It makes far more horsepower than the trucks it replaced. It tows more than most owners will ever ask of it. It rides quieter and smoother than anything built in the 1990s. On paper, on a dyno, on a spec sheet, the new truck wins every number that gets printed in the ad. But a truck engine has one job that no spec sheet measures: stay running. Start every morning, pull every load, and still be turning over at 300,000 miles without a repair bill worth more than the truck. And on that one job, the job that actually matters, the modern engine has quietly gotten worse at surviving and worse at being fixed when it breaks. This didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen because engineers forgot how to build engines. It happened because the engine stopped being designed to last and started being designed to pass. Every year, the government tightens two sets of rules: fuel economy targets and emissions limits. At the same time, every truck maker is locked in a horsepower war with the other two because big numbers sell trucks. So the modern engine has to do three things that fight each other: make more power, burn less fuel, and put out fewer emissions. To thread that needle, engineers reached for complexity. They shrank the engines and bolted on turbochargers. They switched to direct injection. They added systems that shut off half the cylinders. They stacked on emissions hardware. Every one of those choices solved a number on a government chart or a line on a marketing slide, and every one of them added a brand new way for the engine to fail. Start with direct injection, which nearly every modern engine now uses. In an older engine, the fuel sprayed in behind the intake valve and washed it clean on every single cycle. Direct injection sprays the fuel straight into the cylinder instead, which is more efficient. But it means nothing washes the back of those intake valves anymore. So carbon builds up on them layer after layer until the engine stumbles and loses power. The fix is to pull the intake apart and physically blast the carbon off with crushed walnut shells. On a lot of these engines, cleaning that carbon back off becomes a maintenance job all its own on an engine that cost you $70,000. Then there's cylinder deactivation. To save a little fuel, General Motors built many of its V8s to shut down half their cylinders while you cruise, running as a four-cylinder until you ask for power. It works through special lifters that collapse on command. The problem is those lifters fail. When one collapses, it can wipe the camshaft and send metal shavings through the engine. The owner hears a tick, then a misfire, then gets a repair bill between $3,000 and $10,000. It got common enough to trigger class action lawsuits, and common enough that General Motors redesigned its V8s for 2026 to drop the system entirely. They spent 15 years installing a fuel-saving feature that was eating their own engines from the inside. And this is the part that matters most. Every one of the big three fell into the same trap. Ford's answer to the fuel rules was a small twin-turbo V6 called the EcoBoost, and its cam phasers, the parts that adjust the valve timing, rattle loose and wear out, with a timing repair that runs $3,000 to $6,000 at the dealer. Even Ford's simpler V8, the 5.0 Coyote, came down with the same tick. Ram's 5.7 Hemi has its own famous version, the Hemi tick, a lifter and camshaft that wear out and drop metal into the oil, with owners quoted $6,000 to $8,000 to fix it. 3 companies, 3 different engines, one identical story. The more they bolted on to chase a number, the more they handed you to repair. Now add the turbochargers. To keep the power up while shrinking the engine, makers force air in under pressure and pull a big engine's output out of a smaller block. That means more heat and more strain on every part all the time. You're asking a smaller engine to do a bigger engine's work, and heat is what kills engines. More boost, more pressure, more parts living right at the edge of what they can take. Then bolt all of that to a transmission with 10 forward gears where the 1999 truck had 4. 10 chances to shift, 10 times the complexity, 10 more things that can go wrong, and give it a system that shuts the whole engine off at every red light to save a thimble of fuel, then fires it back up when you lift off the brake, running the starter and the bearings through thousands of extra stop and start cycles the old truck never saw. But the worst example lives in the diesels, and it is the clearest proof of the whole pattern. To meet emissions rules, back in 2006, the government stripped almost all the sulfur out of diesel fuel. Sulfur was also what lubricated the fuel pump. So the fuel got cleaner and the pump lost its lubrication at the same moment. Then, a few years later, Ford and General Motors switched to a high-pressure pump called the CP4. When the CP4 runs short on lubrication, it grinds itself apart and sends metal shavings through the entire fuel system, wiping out the injectors, the rails, and the lines all at once. The repair isn't a pump, it's the whole fuel system, $10,000 to $17,000, on trucks that sometimes hadn't even crossed 100,000 miles. It got its own class action lawsuit too. And this is what ties the whole thing together. When any of it fails, you can't fix it in your own driveway. The diagnostics are locked behind dealer-only software. The parts are proprietary. The modern truck isn't just more likely to break. It is built so that only the dealer can put it back together at the dealer's price. And the engine is only where it starts. The modern truck is expensive to fix everywhere, not just under the hood. The front bumper is now packed with radar sensors and cameras that run the safety systems. So a small parking lot bump, the kind that used to cost you a $150 plastic bumper cover, now means replacing sensors and then recalibrating them to the factory's exact aim. That calibration alone can run several hundred to a few $1,000s, and industry data says these systems now add more than 1/3 to the average collision repair bill. The parts are proprietary, the software is locked to the dealer, and the truck is worth so much that insuring it costs a small fortune. That $4,000 truck from 1999 has a steel bumper you can straighten with a chain, parts on the shelf at any store, and an insurance bill that rounds down to almost nothing. The new truck costs you a fortune to buy, and then it keeps costing you every day you own it. Now walk out to that $4,000 truck from 1999 and look at what's under the hood. If it's a Ford, it might have the 7.3 Power Stroke diesel. There's no high-pressure CP for a grenade and no wall of emissions plumbing choking it. It is known to run past 350,000 miles, and plenty of them have crossed 500,000. Mechanics still call it the best diesel Ford ever put in a truck. If it's a Chevy or a GMC, it might have the 5.7 Vortec, a simple iron block V8 with no cylinder deactivation and nothing exotic anywhere on it. Port fuel injection that keeps the valves clean. A pushrod design turned by a chain, not a fragile belt. It fires up in the cold and runs to 300,000 miles on nothing more than oil changes. And if it's a Dodge, there's the 5.9 Cummins, an engine so overbuilt that mechanics used to say it would outlast the truck wrapped around it. The simplest versions were almost entirely mechanical, with barely any electronics on them to fail in the first place. One thing runs through all three. They were built with margin instead of built to a target. They make less power than the modern engines, and that is exactly why they last. Less stress, fewer parts, and not one feature added to chase a number on a chart. When something does finally wear out, it's a part you can buy at any store and often bolt on yourself in an afternoon. These engines were never trying to pass a test. They were only ever trying to run. So they do. So the obvious question is this: why don't the truck makers just build the simple engine again? They can't. The law won't let them. A new engine has to pass today's emissions rules before a single one can be sold, and the old simple engines can't pass them. That is not speculation. It is exactly why they died. The 7.3 Power Stroke and the 5.9 Cummins weren't retired because they wore out, and not because buyers stopped wanting them. They were shut down in the early 2000s because they could no longer meet the tightening emission standards. Every piece bolted onto the modern engine to satisfy the regulators, the high pressure pump, the cylinder deactivation, the turbochargers, is a piece that made the engine worse. The simple engine never failed. It became illegal to sell, and that is the only reason it is gone. So this is what really happened to your $70,000 engine. It isn't badly built. It is brilliantly built for the wrong goal. It was engineered to win the fuel economy chart, clear the emissions limit, and post the biggest horsepower number in the brochure. It was optimized for everything except the one thing a truck engine is actually for, which is to outlast the person who bought it. The 1999 truck came from a time when the engine mostly just had to run, so running is what it was built to do. Every mandate and every marketing war since then made the engine more complex, more stressed, and more expensive to keep alive. The price climbed, the engine got worse. The better engine was never the one with the bigger number on the window sticker. It's the one still starting on a cold morning at 300,000 miles in a truck somebody paid $4,000 for. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.